Alright there lads and lasses, how you doing? It's B here. For the last couple of weeks, I played the shit out of this game. Last time, I ranked the 10 hardest levels in the game in my opinion, and now I thought it'd be fun to rank the bosses in this game in terms of difficulty as well. However, as there's only 10 unique fights in the game, because I'm only going to rank each boss's hardest fight, this is essentially an easiest to hardest list. Some of the bosses in this game were actually surprisingly difficult, so with that said, let's go! When she made her debut in Super Mario 3D Land, she was basically a slightly better Boom Boom, but in the sequel they completely changed her fight and it just doesn't work. She splits herself into clouds to try and chuck a load of shurikens at you, and I use the word try very loosely because, well, Next! So this second boss on this has a right cracking concept. Frickin' geometry! Kafunks and obstacle are fine, but they always follow a strict movement, which leaves this boss with very limited options. Its only attack is slamming its body down, which only covers a quarter of a square on the battlefield, and depending on where he fell from, it can lead him a wide open target. Next! The bosses in this game are for the most part really freaking pathetic. Despite apparently being a prince, he's one of the easiest bullies to deal with in the series. Seriously, the ones in Super Mario 64 gave me more trouble than this guy. It's ridiculously easy to combo push him into one of the pipes, which I'll admit is actually kind of banterous. Once he comes out, you just need to give him a taste of his own medicine. He can breathe out a bunch of fire, which can home in on you, but any slight knock he suffers will stop him from doing that. 3 easy hits and he's down. By this point in the early 2010s, Boom Boom was starting to become as overused as the Koopalings, even sharing many of their traits from their new Super Mario Bros. Fights, such as jumping on their heads 3 times to win, and him retaliating into a shell between each hit. But because he's playing 3D now, you now have the option to either jump over or just get out of the way of his shell. His main method of attack is spinning his arms around, but not only is this easy as hell to get out of the way from, but after a while, he exhausts himself, leaving himself wide open, and that's assuming he even gets a chance to do the attack, because his start-up animation is so slow. Even as the boss of the 4th world, this is really easy. He always starts off the fight summoning his minions, which you literally sacrifice them to hit him whilst he's just rolling around. After each hit, he'll spin around sending out countless amounts of fireballs all over the place, which could never hit you if he stood still. I'm sure it's actually harder to intentionally run into one of these fireballs than it is to avoid them. He will try and edge towards the player during this attack, but even at walking speed, you're faster than him. I know those couple of splodges aren't much of an issue to deal with either, though at least from this point on, the bosses actually do have some amount of challenge. One thing I do have to thank for this Switch port is that we did actually get a good final boss in this game, because the Meowser fight is absolutely terrible. Him using the cat power up is a cool idea, but for 99% of the first phase, his only attack is climbing up and down the tower, which is telegraphed very far in advance. Towards the end of the first phase, he'll breathe fire while sitting on a power block, you absolute pillock, but because of how slow the auto-scrolling is in this fight, you can easily outrun this part. Sadly, the second phase has the same issues despite him using the double cherry, as you can even see the cracks of where he's going to come out from, and because of the auto-scrolling in a similar way to the first phase, you can knock out that power block before the other Meowsers even get a chance to climb up and breathe fire on you. And even on the off chance you do take a hit somewhere, there's castings galore on this tower, so you really shouldn't be having an issue. Shame too, the site actually had some really cool ideas. This is one of the longest fights in the game, despite it only being a few steps up from the last couple of bosses in terms of challenge. They'll both kick off the fight raining down fireballs, but the shadows make them incredibly easy to dodge, before whistling for snake minions to come in, which I needed to beat this boss. Some of these snakes even hand out cat bells on a silver platter, which is needed to climb up the snakes placed on their head, so you can jump onto one of their heads, and with some decent timing, you can pronk onto the other one as well, which is actually pretty satisfying to do. However, some of these plates will break, so you gotta get off them quick. Their other attack involves shooting fireballs specifically at the snakes placed on their head. This is easy to get out of the way. 3 hits on the head for the pair of them and they die together in a bittersweet fashion. You overcompensating for something, mate? This fight was surprisingly a lot of fun, and if you don't have the Kazu, it does actually have a decent amount of difficulty. Its main attacks are breathing fire, leaving puddles on the ground, and chucking footy bombs at you. Yes, it's called football, not soccer, which you need to kick back at him 9 times, though if you can kick the footy bombs right into him, it deals 3 damage to him at once. That on its own isn't too bad. It's when it's combined with the arena it becomes a challenge. The spikes that regularly come out all over the arena, and several instances where the car jumps and lava spiders come out. This especially makes aiming the footy bombs a lot harder. Oh, and some of them will begin to explode right away, so yeah, you're gonna need a good reaction time for that. And not to mention, if you're not paying attention to the arena, a pit can easily catch you out. You can alternatively use the boomerang flower you find in this level, but yeah, good luck not taking a hit in this fight. This guy was the main reason Boss Blitz made my top 10 hardest levels list. Even before you enter this fight, you'll have already fought 5 bosses, so your timer is going to be down. Motley's main method of attack is stomping all over the arena. Whilst yes, that is easy to outrun, every time he stomps the ground, he sends out shockwaves that can cover the whole arena, and he goes from 3 stomps on the first hit to 7 stomps on the final hit. Seriously, good luck not getting hit by one. So even if he wasn't at the end of the boss rush, he'd still be this high. After a number of stomps, he breaks apart, leaving a double cherry and loads of blobs behind as he starts to run away from you. But those shockwaves are still out, so yeah, be careful. And like I said earlier, this is at the end of a boss rush, so your time limit might not be too kind. But even if those double cherries didn't help you, he still wouldn't be number 1. Can I just say this is the best version of Bowser we've had in the series, and especially as well one of the hardest Bowser fights we've had in the series. It's not Bowser X's level, but I'd certainly say this is the second hardest Bowser fight in the series. Even before you get that King of Cat Bell, his fire breaths are huge and nearly impossible to dodge without cover, but the real fight starts when you get that King of Cat Bell. In the first phase, you just need to get his health down to 0, and there's 3 ways of doing that. Chucking one of the Fury Stakes he sends out back at him, or when he's wide open after stomping the ground. The latter of which you have to get out of the way very quickly whilst jumping over the shockwaves and then stomping on his shell. You can also slash at him with your claws, but this often resulted in me taking a hit, so I didn't bother. And those Giga Cat Bells do not respond, so you can only take so many hits. You can also breathe fire and boulders all over the place and hurl himself right at you, but hey, that's not too bad. It's the second phase where he's at the top of the list. Using the heavily underrated Plessy, he sends fireballs galore at you and huge streams of fire which you need to duck under. But it's the Fury stakes you really need to be concerned about, because he sends a fucking shitload of them at you. And ducking isn't going to get you far if there's enough of them, especially if you combine this attack with those fire streams, because after you duck, you need to find a way to jump out, and that's where the fire streams can hit you. Jesus Christ, he wants you deader than dead! Your best bet is to get him when he roars once you've dodged enough of his attacks. If it wasn't for the fact that the power ups you've earned throughout the game were available in this fight, I would have lost several times to him, and that cements it as the hardest fight in the game, possibly in any 3D Mario game as well. This has been Spidinklin, and I would honestly love to see more fights like this in the future.